Hey everyone, PrinceB here. Today we're going to be talking about the Madolche deck type, and this is kind of in celebration of Angeli finally becoming legal here in the TCG with the release of Primal Origins. And while I am not an expert at this deck, there are those out there who are better at it than me. This is the deck that I play, and I would consider myself to be a higher-end player with the deck. No expert, but I know what I'm doing with the deck most of the time. So, without any further ado, let's get started. The Madolche deck type, or archetype, is kind of all over the board. They've got beasts, spellcasters, warriors, and fairies. And the main thing with the Madolches is they recycle themselves when they're destroyed by an opponent's card while they're in your possession, so no shenanigans with creature swap or anything. You have to have, the card has to be in your possession. They will shuffle themselves from the graveyard back into the deck, assuming they hit the graveyard. If they get hit with, your opponent has Macrocosmos on the field, it'll stop that. But the whole idea of the deck is that they shuffle themselves back into the deck. So they have a lot of recyclability. And all of these monsters are Earth. So even though the types are all scrambled, the attributes the same. Let's start by looking at the cards. So first up is Madolche Puddingcess. She's a level 5 fairy with 1,000 attack and defense. While you have no monsters in your graveyard, this card gains 800 attack and defense. And then after damage calculation, if it battles an opponent's monster, regardless of if it wins the battle and stays on the field, or if it loses and it goes to the graveyard and its effect triggers, you can target one card on your opponent that your opponent controls and destroy it. So that's pretty good for some spot removal for troublesome cards, and it can help you get out of Kaiser Coliseum. So it can have a spot in the deck. Some people like it, others don't. I'd say run one if you're going to run it in either the main or the side, unless you're doing a build that focuses solely on Puddingcess, in which case 2 or 3 can work. But I would recommend running at least one in the side. It's up to you though, because it can get really cloggy since it's the only level 5 in the deck. Next is Madolche Angeli, who is the new card that we're getting from Primal Origins. And if you look here, she is fairly expensive still. But she's what she kind of ties the deck together and makes it work a lot better. You can tribute this card, special summon a Madolche monster from your deck, but shuffle it into the deck during the end phase of your next turn. You can only use this effect of Madolche Angeli once per turn, and this special summon monster cannot be destroyed by battle. So basically she's the Madolche that will be going to the graveyard to fuel your graveyard plays. And also a lot of people underestimate the power that unable to be destroyed by battle for the special summon monster effect can have, because Angeli you can summon Angeli and go into Puddingcess, and then you have a 1,000, because it won't get the boost unless you get Angeli out of the grave. But you'll have a 1,000 point monster that can't be destroyed in battle, so if your opponent attacks it, you might take damage unless you summon it in defense mode. But it'll pop your opponent's cards every time it battles until your next end phase when it shuffles into the deck. And that gives you a 1 card out to Kaiser Coliseum with Angeli into Pudding Cess. So that's something to keep in mind when you're considering whether or not you want to run Pudding Cess or not. But Angeli's what really makes the deck good. You want to, well, I've seen some people play 2 mostly because they can't get a 3rd copy or whatever, and some people say it's best at 2, but I would highly recommend you play it at 3. It's really fantastic. It's what ties the deck together. Next is Madolche Madolche, who is a spellcaster, 14/12 with level 4, and when it's normal or flip summoned, you can add a Madolche monster from your deck to your hand. Really simple. She searches any monster in the deck. You want 3 of her as well, just because between Magi and Angeli, you want to see at least one of them in your opening hand, because those are your strong turn 1 plays. Next is Hootcake, who is 15 1100, and despite his appearance, he's not a winged beast, but a beast. So no Icarus attack shenanigans here, but the fact that it is a beast will come in handy later down the line, which I'll explain. When it's, well, once per turn, you can target 1 monster in your graveyard, banish it, and if you do, special summon 1 Madolche monster from your deck, except Madolche Hootcake. You can use this effect of Madolche Hootcake once per turn. Now, this is why we actually want to be able to get monsters into the graveyard, and that's what makes Angeli good, is because she tributes herself and then goes to the graveyard. Every other Madolche, if they're destroyed by your opponent's card, they're going to go back to the deck, leaving you with an empty graveyard. Hootcake is what lets you, like Madolche, Hootcake tutors the whole deck, but instead of adding it to your hand, it just gives you field presence. He's a really powerful card, and actually one of the stronger main deck monsters. 2 or 3 is what I would recommend you run. Personal preference, I like 2 because I don't want to see him in the opening hand. In fact, I don't want to draw Hootcake. I want to be searching it from the deck with Angeli, but I can totally understand people who play it at 3. So that's a preference, but 2 or 3 is what I'd recommend. Next is Mufui, 500, 300. This one is really weak. It's a level 3 like Hootcake. And this one's really simple. When it's normal summoned, you can special summon a Madolche monster from your hand. So that means instant Pudding Cess. You can go Mew Hootcake. That's just about the only time you want to draw Hootcake, is if you also have Mew. But usually your best, Mew with Gelato, who I'll talk about next, and Mew with Angeli. Mew with Angeli is probably your strongest play, and for that reason I run 2, but I've seen Mew run anywhere from 0 to 3. Totally preference. It's the weakest of the Madolches that are typically run, and if it gets like Effect Veilered or something, you're going to be really sad. So preference, test it with all kinds of numbers and decide what works for your playstyle. But it just gives you field presence, and it lets you make rank 3 Xyz with Hootcake. So yeah, I run it at 2, preference card. Madolche Messengelato. When this card is special summoned, you can add 1 Madolche spell or trap card from your deck to your hand. You must control a face-up beast-type Madolche monster to activate and to resolve this effect. Also, he's a warrior with 16 attack, 100 defense. This is why Mufui and Hootcake being beast-type monsters is really important for the deck, because it lets you trigger your Messengelato searches when you use either of their effects to special summon him, and that searches the Madolche spell and trap support. Otherwise, he's basically a normal vanilla monster with just 1600 attack. The strongest of the main deck monsters that are typically played, and it's still really atrocious attack, you don't really want to draw him. And if you do, you want like Mew or something to help you make an Xyz out of him, because he's just pretty terrible card. 2 is what a lot of people play. I've also seen a lot of people play it at 1, and I tried it at 1. it worked okay. I just like being able to have an extra one in the deck for special summoning. But 2 or 1 is what I'd recommend on him. 3 is really cloggy because you don't want to draw him, and 0, he is needed for the spell and trap searches, so I would recommend at least 1. 2 if you're willing to risk drawing it more. But 1 closes out some of your plays if you already draw it, so just keep that in mind. And those ones there, except maybe Pudding Cess, are the ones that are typically played in most builds. Like I said, I've seen some without Mew, but just about every build includes Angeli, Magi, Hoot Cake, and Gelato, at least 1 Gelato. But and then some decks utilize Pudding Cess. The rest of the monsters are ones that aren't played in every deck that are more tech choices. We'll go over them really briefly. Madolche Croissant. Once per turn, you can target 1 face-up Madolche card you control, except this card, return it to the hand, and if you do, increase this card's level by 1 and attack by 300. Beast 1512. So he's got the power to, in 1 turn, go up to 18, making him stronger than anything outside of a Pudding Cess without monsters in the grave, where he'd be the same power. And he can be level 3 or 4, so he's got flexibility there for your rank 3 and rank 4 plays. And also being a beast, if you have him on the field, he'll trigger with Gelato. But generally, he just doesn't have as much utility for what the deck is going for, so it's more of a preference. If you're going to play him, I'd play him at 1. Interesting things to note, he can bounce Madolche Ticket, which I'll talk about later, as well as the field spell. Or he can you can summon Mewfwee with him, and then bounce Mewfwee back to your hand to reuse it later and get Croissant to power up. Preference. Madolche Bapple. When it's in your... I'm sorry. Once per turn, you can target 1 attack position Madolche monster you control, which will usually be this card, and 1 face-up attack position monster your opponent controls. If both monsters are still face-up on the field, change them to face-up defense position, and if you do, the ones changed by this effect cannot have their battle position changed until the end of your next turn, or your opponent's next turn. He's got 18. He's a 18 defense, 0 attack, level 3. And another beast for Gelato. But he saw some play in the past. Mainly he's used to put your opponent's big monsters with low defense into defense position and run over them. You can play 1 if you really want, but I would not recommend it. There's nothing really relevant at the moment that Bapple is going to get you over that you couldn't get over with like another Exceed or something. So yeah, I just wouldn't recommend this, but if you really, really want to play it because it's got, like, super adorable artwork, which I totally understand that, run it at 1, but don't go higher. Madolche Marmalade, spellcaster with 800 attack, defense 2000. Let's see, when this card is flipped face up, you can target 1 Madolche spell or trap card in your graveyard, add that target to your hand. 2000 defense is nice, but realistically, most of our spells and traps we don't use most of the trap cards over here in standard builds, and she's really slow, and we've got other ways of recycling our spells and traps, so I wouldn't recommend her. I'd run 0. Madolche Chevalier, 1700 attack, which is pretty good. Warrior, level 4 with 13 defense. Your opponent cannot target face-up Madolche monsters for attacks except Madolche Chevalier. So it doesn't really fit with. It doesn't really help the deck at all. It's just got 1700 attack, which still is weaker than Croissant and Pudding Cess, and only 100 higher than Gelato. So really, he's not worth your time. I'd only use him in the really gimmicky Madolche Waltz OTK build, but that build isn't really any good, so I wouldn't even bother with him. Run 0. Also interesting, thing to note. Your opponent cannot target Madolche monsters for attacks except Madolche Chevalier. It doesn't say except this card. So if you have two of them on the field, your opponent can still attack Madolche Chevalier. So it won't create a lock like with Marauding Captain or other cards. So don't even try putting two of them on the field because it won't accomplish what you're hoping for. Lastly, on the monster lineup is Madolche Chocolates. Once per turn, when the battle position of a Madolche monsters you control is changed and is now face up, while this card is face up on the field, except during the damage step, you can target one monster on the field, change it to face up defense position, and if you do, unless it is a Madolche monster, it cannot attack, also its effects are negated. Basically, it's a really, really slow version of Fiendish Chain that works with Baffle. Definitely not worth your time. Run 0. It's just really bad. Next up, I almost forgot Madolche Butlerus. Spellcaster, 1500 attack, 800 defense. When this card is normal summoned, you can add one field spell card from your deck to your hand. There must be another face-up Madolche monster on the field to activate and to resolve this effect. He's not really worth it. Gelato can already search our field spell, and he eats up another normal summon to use our effect, and you need to have the Madolche monster. If he could work with special summoning, he might be a little better, but he's just not really worth it. Interesting to note, though, is he can search non-Madolche field spells, so you could use him in some other variants, but I wouldn't bother with him, honestly. Alright, Madolche Ticket. When a Madolche card is returned from your side of the field or graveyard to your hand or main deck by a card effect, add one Madolche monster from your deck to your hand. So it tutors monsters out of your deck basically whenever your monster dies, you can add another Madolche from your deck to your hand, including that same one that just died. And then if you control a face-up fairy-type Madolche monster, you can special summon that monster from your deck in face-up attack position instead of adding it to your hand. So if you have Pudding Cess, Angeli, or the Xyz monster, or you play DNA Surgery Calling Fairies, you can special summon the monster. You can only use the effect of Madolche Ticket once per turn, and that does not stack. So if you have two tickets and a monster dies and shuffles into the deck, you don't get two searches, you just get the one. So some people play it at 2. I would recommend it at 1. Some people want to just for being able to play around with baiting out MST or whatever. But since it doesn't stack, I think it's best at 1. Don't go higher than 2, I would recommend. Chateau, the field spell. When this card is activated, shuffle all Madolche monsters in your graveyard into the deck. All Madolche monsters on the field gain 500 attack and defense, and if a monster in your graveyard would be returned to the deck by the effect of a Madolche monster, you can add it to your hand instead. So basically this lets you decide if you want to add your destroyed cards back to your hand or shuffle them back into the deck. So cards like, say, Mufui, who you want to be able to reuse again instantly on your turn, you can choose to add them back to your hand, and if Gelato is going back into the would go back to the deck, you can decide if you want to add him back to the hand, which normally you wouldn't want to do because he's best from the deck. So and it gives us a 500 point boost, which we really need because all our monsters are really low attack. Our highest main deck monster without boosts is Chevalier at only 17. So Chateau's important. Things to note about it: if multiple cards are going at the same time, you cannot mix and match and choose to send one back to the deck, one back to the hand. You have to choose one or the other. And it's not always best to just activate Chateau whenever. For example, if your opponent has a face down and you have Madolche Mageline over here and you go to summon her, and they have Bottomless, it won't work since she's only 14, but if you play the Chateau first and then summon Mageline, she'll fall into that Bottomless and be banished. So keep that in mind. Just pay attention and think things through when you're playing the Chateau, and you should be fine. Over here at the traps, we've got Madolche Lesson. Target a Madolche monster in your graveyard, shuffle that target into the deck, and if you do, all Madolche monsters you currently control get 800 attack and defense. Then you can shuffle one other monster from your deck and graveyard into the deck. Really bad. Doesn't really help us at all, since a lot of the time we want to get our monsters into the grave for fueling Hoot Cake plays and our Xyz monster, which we'll get to later. Run 0, I'd say. It's a bad card. Madolche Knights and T-Break are counter traps. Both require you to have no monsters in your graveyard to activate them. And Knights negates the activation of an effect monster, and T-Break negates the activation of a spell or trap and then returns it to the hand. Neither of these destroy the cards, so that's why they don't see a lot of play outside of Pudding Cess builds, where they each gain another effect. Knights, if you have Pudding Cess, you shuffle one random card from the opponent's hand into the deck, and T-Break destroys one card your opponent controls. Pudding Cess builds can use them, but otherwise I wouldn't bother with them. Madolche Waltz, which I briefly mentioned earlier. Each time a Madolche monster you control attacks or is attacked, after damage calculation, inflict 300 damage to your opponent. There's a really gimmicky OTK build with this, Gelato, Chevalier, and Desperate Tag, which just burns your opponent for game, but it's really bad, and I wouldn't bother with it. 300 is negligible in most circumstances. And lastly, Madolche Palooza. Special summon any number of Madolche monsters from your hand, but shuffle them into the deck during the end phase. This is really good. It lets you flood the field with monsters, basically, and then you want to Xyz with them before they get shuffled back, so that you can maintain board presence. Play 0 to 3. It's pretty much totally preference. I play only 1 just because it's not a card I like personally, but I've seen plenty of Palooza-centric builds that run 2 or 3 copies, and their whole thing is just draw it as early as possible and flood the field. So preference card 0 to 1, you'll be fine. I'd recommend at least 1 though. Lastly, Madolche Queen Tiara Masu, our Xyz monster, needs 2 level 4 Madolche monsters, and it has 2200 attack, 2100 defense, and is a fairy for a ticket. Once per turn, you can detach 1 Xyz material from this card, then target up to 2 Madolche cards in your graveyard. Shuffle those cards into the deck, then shuffle cards your opponent controls into the deck up to the number of cards returned. Alright, so first of all, Tiara Masu will, you can choose Madolche monsters, or since it says card, you can also choose the spells and traps. So usually it's easier to, outside of using Xyz materials or having an Angeli just floating in the grave, which will probably be used to summon Hoot, so you probably won't have Angeli in the grave too often. Spells and traps are pretty good ways to use it, but usually you'll be using Xyz materials to trigger her effect. You can, when you detach the Xyz material from this card, you can target that material that you detached, as long as you have a valid target in the graveyard to begin with. So if you have Butlerusk in the grave, and your materials are Chevalier and Gelato, and you detach Mess and Gelato for Tiara Masu's effect, as long as you had a Madolche card in the graveyard to begin with, then you can target the Gelato and shuffle that back into the deck as well. And then when she hits those cards your opponent controls to shuffle back into the deck, that is not a targeting effect. So cards that resist targeting or whatever, those won't work. So and that's pretty much what makes her, like, that's what separates her from other cards, that she doesn't target and she doesn't destroy. And I would recommend you play 2 copies of her. That's general consensus. 3, you don't really need 3. 1, you don't want just 1, because if it gets bottomless or whatever. And 2 is actually, as long as it doesn't get bottomless, you can actually use the second copy to recycle the first copy back into your extra deck. Also, Chateau can recycle it as well. So that's why you just need two. Next, we'll look at some other cards that can really help. We've got MX Saber Invoker, which you usually play at 1. And that's just for, it just tutors out Messengelato from the deck, special summons it, and helps you bridge into your Tiara plays. Also, you just need one of him. He's not even as important as he was before Angeli came out. Next is Levier the Sea Dragon. Since Hootcake banishes your monsters, you want to be able to return your Angelis and other miscellaneous monsters that end up banished due to Hootcake's effect with Levier. And you want 2 of them just because of you're going to have a lot more banished monsters because of Angeli going into Hootcake and then Hootcake banishing it. And like Invoker, it just helps you bridge into the Tiara Masu plays. Let's see. Other cards, basic extra deck stuff, Abyss Dweller, Equipped Engineer is pretty good for protecting Tiara Masu, Ghost Rick Alucard for popping face downs. These are the only cards I'd say you absolutely need in the deck, and even Invoker you could technically run it without him. But you definitely want the 2 Tiaras, the 2 Leviers, and probably 1 Invoker just for the obscure situations where you need him and you don't have something banished. But otherwise, just extra deck cards that are generic. I wouldn't bother with... some people really like Blade Armor Ninja and Heroic Champion Excalibur since they have Gelato. I wouldn't bother. There are better cards you can play in there. I'd play Diamond Direwolf before that, and I don't even really like that card. But yeah, there are a lot of options. Those are the main ones that we need in the extra. Outside of that, you're free to play whatever. For the main combo of the deck, I'd say, well, here, you need Angeli, and it works really well if you have Mew. You want to summon Mew, special Angeli, tribute Angeli to special Hootcake, use Hootcake's effect to banish Angeli, and special summon Messengelato. Messengelato will search you a ticket or a chateau, and then overlay the Mew and the Hootcake to make Levier, detach one of the monsters, and special summon back the Angeli, overlay the Angeli with the Gelato, special summon Queen Tiara Masu, play the ticket or well, if you chose Chateau to search, don't play that yet, and if you chose ticket, then play it now. Detach one of the materials from Tiara Masu and target the material you detached and the Mewfui or Hootcake that you detached for Levier. Shuffle those back into the deck, and then return 2 cards your opponent controls, and then you can use Ticket's effect to special summon another monster from your deck. That's the basic combo, and there are all kinds of other cards you can play in the deck to help complement that, like Trap Stun is a really good card that you should be playing in either the main or the side, and you could use Wiretap instead. Trap Stun just kind of, I'd say it's better in the deck because it's a blanket answer to all traps for 1 turn and lets you get your play off, instead of where Wiretap will only hit that 1 card and stop it. As for other things you can run, Maxi, Effect Veiler, and DD Crow are pretty good right now because they can discard from the hand and give you great fodder for Hootcakes when you don't have Angeli or whatever. Let's see. You can use attack-stopping monsters like Construction, Train Signal Red, Rainbow Karibo, Ghost Rick Jack Frost. These are just some. I wouldn't recommend Swift Scarecrow or Battle Fader, because those need direct attacks. Jack Frost is best in if you're doing a Madolche Ghost Trick combo deck. If you're playing Trick or Treat, then Ghost Trick Jack Frost is good. Otherwise, it's not really super great here because it's a level 1, so it doesn't really do anything for the deck. Karibo is good because it can stop any attack. It doesn't have to be a direct, and then it also gets another use from the graveyard. Personally, I'm a fan of Construction Train Signal Red in this deck because it's an Earth and level 3, which means it has synergy with your things like Hootcake and Mew. And basically, if you summon a Magi Search, and then next turn your opponent goes to attack, you can use Train Signal Red to block that attack and redirect it onto him, and he can't be destroyed by that battle. Meaning that unless your opponent has, if your opponent has 2 monsters, then you're still going to lose a monster probably. But if they just have 1 monster and they attack, Train Signal will soak up that attack, save your monster, and then give you a level 3 for your combo next turn. Or if one of them doesn't survive, then at least you'll still have one of your monsters on board. So, and he still acts as grave fodder for Hootcake, so I personally like that. Maxi is a pretty good card in the mirror. Effect Veiler and DD Crow are cards you could also run. I run those in the side, but Maxi, DD Crow, and Veiler are all fairly important cards that I'd recommend you at least look at siding. And then other things, I've seen a lot of people playing like the hands and stuff. So, and those work for giving you graveyard fodder and just destruction engine. Basically, Madolches have a lot of versatility, and they can do a lot of different things. So that's just the basic stuff. You can just play around with that and decide what you want and go from there. I'll just go ahead and oh, I should talk about the weaknesses. Main weaknesses, the deck is graveyard based, so macro defissure will mess it up. They all have fairly low attack, so that won't really be helpful. If you can't get Chateau up, just about any deck can run over them really easily. And they're very it's a very combo oriented deck. So if you can't get your combos off, then like if they get disrupted by Bottomless, Torrential, Black Horn of Heaven for your Tiara Masu or your Levier plays, Effect Veiler, anything that can really just stop your combo will just kind of ruin you. So that's pretty much it. I'll go ahead and leave a sample deck list below. This is just an old one that I was doing. An old deck list I used, and so you can look at what I'm playing in there, and that'll just give you a general idea of how the deck can be constructed. So with that, thanks for watching. Leave your thoughts, comments down below. Like, subscribe, and just share with your friends, and have fun playing with Madolche.